I have never been as tempted to switch away from my Sony cameras as I am right now. I'm not gonna switch though, and I'll tell you why. What is up people, Dunna here, and today we're talking about one of the most incredible new cameras to hit the market, the Fujifilm X-T3. This camera is Fuji's newest entry into the aps-c mirrorless market, and it is a banger. Do people still say banger? This thing is jam-packed with new exciting features and specs, and I'm probably not gonna talk about all of them, so I'll leave a link in the description if you wanna go check out the specs, as well as an affiliate link for this camera and all my other gear if you want to buy anything and support the channel at the same time. So what I want to talk about today regarding the X-T3 is my experience shooting with it over the past couple of weeks. I shot some photos, I shot some videos, and this thing is super impressive. We're going to go through some of the good things about this camera, some of the not so good things about this camera, and there aren't many. We're going to talk about who should buy this camera. I'm going to try and answer as many of the questions that you guys asked me over on Instagram as I can, and of course, I'm gonna show you guys photos and videos that I took using this camera so that you can judge the quality for yourself. So let's head out and put this thing to the test.
Let's put our living stereo stylus in this groove.
So first off, right when I pulled this thing out of the box, I fell in love with the aesthetic of it. You feel like you're shooting on a film camera and it kind of makes you feel a little cooler than you actually are. It's got a really nice weight to it in your hands, and for me that kind of makes it feel like it was built well. Just like its predecessor, the X-T2, it has buttons and dials galore, so once you kind of customize things the way that you like them, you rarely have to reach inside the menus, which in my opinion is a good thing because I'm not a huge fan of the menus in the Fuji cameras. They're not terrible by any means, but even once I knew where to look for things, I found that it took me a long time to get there and to change stuff. All of the buttons and dials on this are relatively easy to use. They made the exposure compensation dial a little bit smaller so that you don't accidentally bump it, so it no longer hangs right up to the edge. And they also locked the diopter adjustment, so again, you don't bump that by accident and change it, because you'd be sitting there thinking everything was out of focus. My only gripes with the ergonomics of this camera are the focus select knob, which is down in the corner on the front here, and it's a little hard to get at, and the fact that, again, just like the X-T2, the grip itself is very shallow. Again, like I said, it's kind of a heavier camera, so when you're holding onto it, you feel like you're gonna drop it because there's not much to hold onto there. And it seems to be something that they're kind of sticking with. But I just really don't want to drop this beautiful thing. It's got dual SD card slots, which seems to be a pretty hot topic right now. They've also added USB-C, which not only can you charge with, but you can also plug in a power source and use the camera while it's plugged in. And a really nice thing is that they've added a headphone jack as well, so that you can check the level of your microphone. When you're shooting video, this is very important. On the X-T2, you actually had to buy the extended battery grip to get that headphone output, but now it's built right in there. In fact, previously on the X-T2, you had to buy the battery grip to get a whole bunch of features. For some reason, they weren't in the camera themselves. You had to have the battery grip attached for them to even be unlocked, like a super cheat code or something like that. But the people at Fujifilm listened to the people using their cameras, and they've now made it so the battery grip, if you buy it for this thing, is just a battery grip. All of the features that you're gonna want are already built into the camera, so there's no extra purchase to unlock longer videos or that kind of thing. Now the real magic behind this camera is that they put a brand spanking new backlit sensor in it, and it is awesome. Just like you would expect, it has those beautiful Fujifilm colors, it has improved low light performance, and in my opinion, they've greatly improved the video quality on this, which is something that I wasn't as happy with on the X-T2. When I first got this camera, it was so new that Lightroom hadn't supported the raw files from it yet, so I went around shooting JPEGs, and the JPEGs out of this thing are beautiful. There's so much detail left in them, they're really editable. It's not quite like dealing with RAW files, but man, there's a lot of flexibility with the JPEGs that come out of this thing. And on top of that, you've got all of those really cool film simulation presets that they put in their cameras. So you can get some really cool looks straight out of the camera without even having to do any editing necessarily. They've significantly reduced rolling shutter, which is a huge problem in a lot of these mirrorless cameras, especially for video shooters. That's one of the biggest things that I struggle with the a6500, so it's really nice to see Fuji taking steps forward on this. Another big thing for sports shooters and anyone who's doing action stuff, they've jacked up the burst rate to 11 frames per second, or if you're shooting in silent mode, you can actually get 30 frames per second, which is basically like shooting video. It's actually faster than the video that I'm shooting right now. What? Also, thanks to that new sensor, the autofocus has been overhauled and it is a huge improvement. I'm pretty confident to say that Fujifilm is starting to come pretty close to Sony and Canon autofocus, which in my opinion is really good because it's really going to push the whole camera industry to make their autofocus systems better and better every time. They've got face detect autofocus, which works really nice. They've got eye detect autofocus, and both of those actually still work in video mode, which is kind of crazy. And if you dig into the menu, you can actually get even more specific about it and choose which eye you want it to focus on. Just kind of a little touch that might make the difference for some people. The only thing that I've heard from some other reviewers is that the autofocus is actually a little bit too snappy in video mode, and so when you put something in front of the camera, it actually snaps to it too fast instead of doing a nice smooth focus pull. One thing that I would really like to see that they didn't do on this model is subject tracking in autofocus. So to be able to choose the subject in the scene and have the focus follow that subject, especially when there are multiple people in the scene and it's not really sure which face to latch onto, it's going to choose the one that's either the closest to the camera or kind of more central. And if that's not what you want, then it would be nice to be able to choose your subject. Hopefully that's something that they can do in a firmware update at some point. Another nice thing is that they've actually added a touchscreen on the back of this, which is really handy for choosing your focus point. Unfortunately, just like the Sony cameras, you can't use the touchscreen in the menus. But I think for most people, that's probably not a deal breaker.
1, 2, 3, listen.
Okay, let's talk about video. There are a whole bunch of brand new features on this thing that make it an amazing contender in the mirrorless video market. This thing can shoot 4K 24 frames per second at 400 megabits per second at 10-bit 420 internally or 10-bit 422 to an external recorder. Now this is awesome because it gives you so much more capability to do grading and changing things afterwards in post. Whereas, for example, with the Sony cameras, you can only go up to 100 megabits per second and it's only 8-bit 420. So you're just not quite getting as much information in those cameras as you are with this one. And there's more. This thing can shoot 4K 60 frames per second, which there are very few cameras out there that can do that right now, which means that you can get 2.5 times slow motion in beautiful 4K. If you're interested in seeing more video footage that was shot on this camera, I shot an entire video on it, kind of more like a vlog type of thing. I'll link it up here so you can go check that out. There's a little bit of slow motion and everything was shot not only in 24 frames per second 4K or 60 frames per second 4K, but also I shot the whole thing in F-Log so you can see how it grades as well. A few smaller things that I really enjoyed about the camera: the startup time is so fast. If something's happening right in front of you and it's happening quick, you don't want to miss it, so you need a camera that can start up quickly. The Fujifilm is awesome at this. The startup time is so fast that you never miss a shot. Another little thing that I know some cameras don't have is the log setting internally in the cameras. They have Fuji's F-Log and they supply you with Luts on the website. I found that they worked really well, and there's a really cool one in there that will correct from log footage to their Eterna film simulation preset. Now there are only two things with this camera that are kind of deal breakers for me that make it so that I'm not ready to switch over from my Sony yet. The first one, lack of in-body stabilization. I get it, some of you guys are gonna say that optical stabilization on the lenses works better than in-body stabilization, but the bottom line of it is that not all lenses have that. So to have in-body stabilization inside the camera allows you to use any lens and have some sort of stabilization. For someone who shoots a lot of video and does kind of vlogging where I'm carrying the camera around, this is a very important thing for me. If you don't need stabilization, if you're always set up on a tripod, or if you only do photography, maybe this isn't a deal to you. Or maybe you're willing to deal with it, just buy stabilized lenses, or just be very careful when you're using non-stabilized glass. The other thing that's a bit of a deal breaker for me is the price. Currently, as it stands, the Fujifilm X-T3 costs $500 more than a Sony a6500. And I kind of consider those two cameras to be fairly similar as far as quality. You're definitely getting one heck of a camera camera here, and if the prices were more similar, I feel like I would say it would almost be a no-brainer to go with the Fuji, but because of that price gap, it makes it a bit of a tough call. The A6500 has that in-body stabilization, and you could bank that $500 and put it towards some nice glass or something. Okay, so who is this camera for? Who should buy it? Who's gonna use it? Honestly, this is one of the best all-around cameras that's on the market today. For videographers, you've got tons of options as far as bit rates and depths and that kind of thing. The 4K quality is awesome. You've got that 4K 60 in there. For vloggers, as long as you've got an optically stabilized lens and you don't mind not having a flip screen. For photographers, well, it's Fuji. They're known for having great photography cameras, and this is definitely no exception. It's compact, so it's good for traveling. Really, the only thing is that it's a little bit expensive, so I think it's more going to be limited by your budget than what you're shooting specifically. Like I said, I think this is one of the best all-around cameras that's on the market right now. Again, if you want to see more of the specs, or if you're interested in purchasing this, there are links for that in the description. But as always, I want to turn it over to you guys. What do you think of this camera? Is it something that you would consider switching from your current system or upgrading from the X-T2 if you have it? Leave a comment below, let's start a conversation. Big shout out to Fujifilm Canada for lending me this one to do a review on. If you had fun or you learned something, make sure to hit that thumbs up button. If you want to be friends, click the circle and subscribe to this channel. Hit that bell notification so you don't miss anything. If you want to watch another video, there's one right here. I think you'll really like it, and I'll see you next time.